Rain hammered the cracked windows of the Golden Cup Diner, a place that smelled like burnt coffee, fryer grease, and a little bit of hopelessness. Midnight shifts always felt heavier in winter. But for Grace Miller, they were just another chapter in the long book of surviving. Her sneakers squeaked on the greasy floor as she wiped down booth after booth, trying not to think about the overdue rent notice tucked inside her apron pocket. Grace, stop daydreaming, and clear table 5. Brenda, the manager, barked from behind the counter. Her voice carried the kind of bitterness only 30 years in food service could breed. "On it," Grace replied, forcing a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Outside, the rain was relentless, turning the city into a blur of grey reflections and flickering neon. Just as Grace reached for a stack of dirty plates, the diner's door creaked open with a tired little bell chime. A gust of cold air followed, along with something or someone small. At first, she thought it was a stray animal. But then the figure stumbled under the buzzing fluorescent lights, revealing a teenage girl, drenched from head to toe. Her jeans were torn, her hands trembling as she clutched a backpack that looked like it had been through a war. "Sweetheart, you can't just stand there," Brenda snapped from the register. "This isn't a shelter." Grace froze. The girl's lips were pale, her skin ghostly under the harsh light. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was soft, cracked, like she hadn't spoken in days. "I just need somewhere warm for a minute." Brenda rolled her eyes. "No handouts. Get her out before customers complain." There weren't any customers left, just a trucker half asleep over a plate of fries. Grace looked from the girl to her manager, then to the rain outside that hadn't let up once in hours. "She's freezing," Grace said quietly. "Let me give her a coffee. I'll pay for it." "Company policy says no freebies," Brenda snapped. "You want to break rules again? Be my guest. But don't expect to clock in tomorrow." Grace hesitated. Her son, Michael, was home alone with a fever. Her paycheck meant food, medicine, rent, everything. But something in the girl's eyes, wild fear mixed with shame, cut straight through her. Without another word, Grace grabbed a mug, poured hot coffee, and set it down in front of the girl. "Drink this," she said softly. "You're safe here for a while." The girl's hands shook as she wrapped them around the cup. "Thank you," she whispered, tears mixing with raindrops on her cheeks. "Nobody's been kind to me in days." Grace smiled faintly. "Then tonight's a good night to change that." From across the diner, Brenda's voice sliced through the brief peace. "Grace, my office. Now." Grace exhaled slowly, her heart sinking. "Give me 1 minute," she told the girl, then walked toward the back, where fluorescent light flickered like judgment itself. Behind the office door, Brenda's tone was ice. "You're fired. I warned you. We don't feed strays, and we don't break policy. Turn in your apron and keys." Grace felt the words hit like a slap. "You're serious? Over a cup of coffee? Over disobedience. Actions have consequences." Grace's throat tightened. "Then so does cruelty." Brenda blinked, momentarily stunned. Grace tossed her apron on the counter and walked out, the smell of burnt oil and injustice clinging to her uniform. Outside, the girl stood waiting under the awning, still holding the mug. Her voice trembled. "You got fired because of me, didn't you?" Grace forced a smile through the ache in her chest. "Don't worry about it, kid. Sometimes the right thing costs more than it should." A sleek black car slowed at the curb, its tinted window rolling down just enough for a pair of sharp eyes to watch them both. The rain didn't stop that night, and neither did the worry. Grace Miller stood in the doorway of her small apartment, watching the water drip from her jacket onto the faded linoleum floor. Inside, the place was silent except for the soft wheeze of her son's breathing from the couch. Michael was 10, small for his age, with a mop of dark hair and a face that still carried traces of babyhood. His asthma always got worse when the weather changed. A half-used inhaler sat on the coffee table, beside an unopened envelope from the landlord. She didn't need to open it to know what it said. Grace hung up her coat and crouched beside him, brushing a hand through his hair. "Hey, buddy," she whispered. "You took your meds?" He stirred, blinking up at her with sleepy eyes. "Yeah, you smell like fries again." Grace smiled faintly. That's what happens when your mum's a fry queen. He yawned. Did you bring any pie? Her smile faltered. Not tonight, sweetheart. She kissed his forehead and pulled the blanket up to his chin. When he drifted back to sleep, Grace sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the single light bulb swaying slightly from the D. Her chest tightened. Fired. Again. And this time, there was no safety net, no savings, just the two of them against the world. Her mind drifted back to another night 10 years ago, the night she'd left home. Her father's voice had been thick with whiskey, his hand heavy as he slammed it on the table. You think you're better than this family? You walk out that door, don't come back. She had walked out anyway, clutching a plastic grocery bag that held 2 shirts and a dream. She never looked back. Now, at 30, life hadn't exactly rewarded her courage. She worked, she worried, she endured. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her entire heart belonged to the boy asleep in the other room. A faint knock broke the silence. Grace froze. It was nearly midnight. She stood, padding quietly to the door and peered through the peephole. The girl. She was standing in the hallway, dripping wet, hugging her backpack to her chest. Her eyes were wide and frightened. Grace opened the door a crack. What are you doing here? I didn't know where else to go, the girl stammered. You were nice. I didn't want to sleep outside again. Grace hesitated. The rational part of her screamed, no, too risky, too much to lose. But then the girl's voice cracked. Please, just for one night. Grace sighed. Come in, quietly. The girl stepped inside, her soaked sneakers squeaking on the floor. Grace handed her a towel. What's your name? Lily, she said softly. Lily Hart. Grace nodded. I'm Grace. That's my son Michael. He's asleep, so keep your voice down. Ok. Lily looked around the small apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the stack of bills, the hand-me-down furniture. You didn't have to help me, she whispered. Most people don't even look at me. Grace poured her a cup of tea from the kettle that had seen better days. Maybe they should. Lily smiled weakly and reached into her backpack, pulling out a silver pendant on a thin chain. It shimmered even in the dim light. My mom gave me this, she said, before she died. Ugh. Grace's gaze lingered on it. The crest engraved in the metal, an intricate D, framed by 2 wings, looked strangely familiar. She frowned. That's beautiful, she murmured. Looks expensive. Lily shook her head. It's the only thing I have left. She said it would protect me. Grace didn't know it yet, but that pendant would soon rewrite both their lives. Morning light crept through the thin curtains, painting soft gold lines across the tiny apartment. The smell of instant coffee mixed with the faint sweetness of toast. Grace stood at the sink, staring out at the city beyond the cracked window pane. It looked so close she could touch it, the skyscrapers, the glass towers, the promise of a better life. But for people like her, that world was sealed shut. Behind her, Lily sat at the small table, wearing one of Grace's old sweaters, its sleeves hanging past her hands. She looked younger in daylight, fragile, but strikingly beautiful beneath the dirt and exhaustion. Michael, still groggy, shuffled from the couch. He blinked at the stranger in his kitchen. Mom, who's that? Grace hesitated. This is Lily. She needed a place to stay last night. Michael tilted his head. Are you homeless? Lily looked down, embarrassed. Yeah, just for now. Grace shot him a gentle warning glance. Eat your breakfast, honey. As the boy sat, Lily whispered, I can leave after this. I don't want to cause trouble. You're not, Grace said softly. Just stay until the rain stops. But when Grace looked outside again, the clouds were still heavy and grey. It felt like the whole city was stuck under the same sadness. Across town, in a world built on marble and glass, a very different morning was beginning. At the top of the Drayton Tower, Alexander Drayton's penthouse stretched over the skyline like a kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, and everything gleamed. The polished black piano, the designer furniture, the endless view of wealth and power. He stood by the window, dressed in a tailored grey suit, a cup of untouched espresso cooling in his hand. His assistant, Ryan scrolled through the morning's headlines on a tablet. "Sir, the press is still running the story about your daughter's disappearance," Ryan said carefully. "It's trending again, number find Lily Drayton." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Turn it off." Ryan hesitated. "The board thinks—" "I said turn it off." Alexander snapped, the edge in his voice sharp enough to cut glass. He stared out the window, his reflection staring back a man who had everything except the one thing that mattered. It had been 3 weeks since Lily ran away. 3 weeks of silence, sleepless nights, and unanswered prayers. "Sir," Ryan continued cautiously, "the gala tonight is still on. The foundation expects your speech." Alexander exhaled, his shoulders heavy. "I'll be there. Make sure security is doubled." He looked toward the mantel where a silver-framed photo sat, a young girl laughing beside a woman with kind eyes, his late wife, Claire, gone 5 years now. The ache in his chest never left. "Find her," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't care what it costs." Back in Grace's apartment, Lily was staring at the same city, unaware her father's empire hovered just beyond those skyline towers. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Lily asked quietly. Grace chuckled. "Every day. But dreams don't pay rent." Lily's eyes softened. "You gave me a roof when you didn't have much yourself." "Why?" Grace shrugged. "Because somebody should have done the same for me once." Lily studied her for a long moment, then reached into her pocket, gripping the pendant tightly. "If I could pay you back, I would. More than you can imagine." Grace smiled sadly. "You just get yourself back on your feet. That's payment enough." Neither of them noticed the sleek black sedan parked across the street, its tinted window cracked open. A man inside lowered his phone, staring at a photo on the screen, a missing person report with Lily's face. His hand clenched around the phone. The search was over. He had found her. By the time the rain finally stopped, Grace was already late for her appointment at the job agency. She'd left Lily and Michael at home with a box of cereal and a promise she'd be back before lunch. The streets glistened with puddles, sunlight bouncing off glass towers she'd only ever cleaned the floors of. Inside the agency, the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry insects. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and frustration. A man in a wrinkled suit called her name. "Grace Miller, come on back." She followed him into a cramped office stacked with folders. He didn't look up from his computer as he spoke. "So, terminated from Golden Cup Diner. Reason for dismissal, policy violation. That's gonna be a problem." Grace folded her hands tightly in her lap. "I didn't steal or lie. I helped someone who needed it." The man finally looked up. His expression was somewhere between pity and indifference. "Doesn't matter. Employers see terminated and move on." Her throat tightened. "There has to be something. Anything." He sighed, typing half-heartedly. "There's a cleaning position. Nights. No benefits. You'd have to start tonight." Grace swallowed her pride and nodded. "I'll take it." As she left the building, a black car slowed near the curb. She didn't notice it at first until the back window rolled down just enough for a voice to call out. "Grace Miller?" She froze. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out. He looked out of place on this cracked sidewalk, as though wealth itself followed him like a shadow. "My name is Ryan," he said smoothly. "I work for Mr. Alexander Drayton. He'd like to ask you a few questions." Grace frowned. "About what?" "About a girl named Lily." Her stomach dropped. "What about her?" Ryan glanced toward the car. "Please, ma'am. It's important." Grace hesitated only a moment before following him to the sedan. The interior smelled of leather and money. Inside sat a man she recognized instantly from the news. The billionaire developer, Alexander Drayton. His face looked carved from stone, eyes cold but burning with something raw beneath the surface. "You're Grace Miller?" he asked, his voice low, deliberate. She nodded cautiously. "Yes. You housed my daughter last night." Grace's pulse quickened. "Your daughter?" "Lily Drayton," he said, pulling out a photo from his jacket. The same face, but clean, radiant, taken long before the streets hardened her features. Grace stared at it. "She didn't tell me her last name." Alexander's jaw tightened. Where is she now? She's safe, Grace said carefully. At my apartment. He leaned forward. Take me there. Grace crossed her arms. Not until you tell me what's going on. That girl's terrified of someone. You? The question landed like a slap. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in the front seat, but Alexander didn't flinch. My daughter ran away after her mother's funeral. She thinks I care more about business than family. She's wrong. Grace studied him for a long moment. Then maybe you should tell her that yourself, instead of sending men in suits. Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or exhaustion. He nodded once. Fair enough. Let's go. Back at the apartment. Lily was sitting on the couch, flipping through a worn children's book Michael had lent her, when the door opened and Alexander stepped inside, her face drained of color. Lily, he said softly. She shot to her feet, eyes wide with anger and fear. You found me, because I was never going to stop, he replied. Lily shook her head. You don't get to act like you care now. Grace stood frozen between them, the air thick with years of silence and secrets. And then Lily screamed, You ruined Mom's life, and now you're trying to ruin mine. And everything Grace thought she understood shattered. The tension in the room was so thick it felt like breathing through glass. Lily stood frozen, her fists clenched, her face streaked with tears and defiance. Alexander's presence filled the tiny apartment like a storm cloud. Too large, too powerful for a space that smelled of instant coffee and laundry soap. Lily, he said carefully, his tone a mix of authority and desperation. I came here to take you home. This is my home now, she snapped. You only notice me when it's good for your image. Grace's heart hammered in her chest. She wanted to step between them, to calm the rising tide. But this was a wound years deep, one she didn't understand. Alexander exhaled slowly, eyes flicking to Grace. You don't understand, Miss Miller. My daughter's been missing for 3 weeks. The police, the media, they're all involved. This isn't just about family. It's about her safety. Lily scoffed. Safety? You mean control? She turned to Grace, voice trembling. He wants to lock me up again. Pretend everything's perfect for the cameras while he builds his towers on people's homes. Grace blinked, confused. What do you mean? Alexander's tone sharpened. Don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's saying. I do, Lily cried. You destroyed Mom's charity project because it wasn't profitable. You called it a waste of resources. Alexander's composure cracked. That project would have gone bankrupt. I was trying to save your mother from losing everything. Then you let her die believing she failed. Lily's voice broke. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Michael, half asleep in the next room, stirred from the tension humming through the walls. Grace finally spoke, her voice low but steady. You both need to stop yelling. This isn't helping anyone. Alexander turned to her sharply. You've done enough, Miss Miller. I appreciate your help, but this is a private matter. Grace straightened, heat rising in her chest. Private? She showed up half-starved and soaked through. I took her in because nobody else did. Maybe if you'd been looking with your heart instead of your money, she wouldn't have ended up on my doorstep. His eyes flared with indignation. Watch your tone. Or what? She shot back. You'll buy the building and kick me out? The words hit their mark. For the first time, Alexander looked speechless. Lily's lip quivered. You see? She gets it. For once, someone's not afraid to talk back to you. Before Alexander could respond, a loud bang echoed outside the unmistakable pop of a camera flash. Grace rushed to the window. Across the street, a cluster of reporters was forming. Lenses pointed straight at her apartment. Oh no, she whispered. Ryan cursed under his breath. Someone leaked the location. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions up from the street. Mr. Drayton, is it true your daughter was hiding with a waitress? Grace Miller, were you paid to keep her? Why was the billionaire's daughter in a low-income neighborhood? Lily froze. They found me. Alexander swore and pulled out his phone. We're leaving. Now. Grace shook her head. She's not going anywhere until she's ready. Miss Miller, he said, voice icy. You're interfering in a situation far beyond your understanding. Grace crossed her arms. Maybe. But I understand kindness. I understand what it means to protect someone when no one else will. For a moment, their eyes locked, his world of power colliding with hers of survival. Then Alexander's expression hardened. Fine. You want to protect her? Protect her from this. He stepped to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and faced the flashing cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, he said coldly, my daughter is safe, thanks to the kindness of this woman, Grace Miller. But our business here is done. Grace blinked. What? You're fired from the new cleaning job you just took, he interrupted. The company is mine. Her stomach dropped. You can't. I just did. The crowd outside roared with headlines, and Grace stood there in shock as the man she'd sheltered humiliated her in front of the entire city. The next morning, Grace woke up to the sound of her phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Her inbox was flooded. Unknown numbers, reporters, bloggers. The words waitress, billionaire, and runaway heiress flashed across every headline. She rubbed her eyes, praying it was a nightmare. But the TV on the wall confirmed the truth, news anchors dissecting her life like it was public property. Grace Miller, the single mother who allegedly hid billionaire Alexander Drayton's daughter for 3 weeks, has been terminated from her job, one anchor said brightly. Sources claim she disobeyed direct orders and refused to cooperate with authorities. Grace switched off the TV and buried her face in her hands. In the kitchen, Michael was watching from his seat, holding a half-eaten bowl of cereal. Mom, he whispered, are they talking about you? Grace forced a smile. Yeah, buddy. Just some people who don't know the truth. He frowned. Are you in trouble? She knelt beside him, her voice soft but trembling. No, we're going to be fine. I promise. Before she could say more, there was a knock at the door, sharp, official, relentless. Grace's stomach twisted. She opened it to find 2 uniformed officers and a man in a grey suit. Miss Miller? The suited man asked. I'm Edward Klein, legal representative for Mr. Drayton. We're here to collect his daughter, M. Grace's blood ran cold. She's not here, she said, standing tall. She left last night. That's unfortunate, Klein replied with a faint smile. Because if she doesn't return home voluntarily, this becomes a kidnapping investigation. Grace blinked in disbelief. Kidnapping? I didn't keep her here. She came on her own. Nevertheless, he said, handing her a folded document, Mr. Drayton's legal team will be filing charges if she isn't returned within 24 hours. The paper trembled in her hand as they turned and walked away. She shut the door and leaned against it, breathless. Michael peeked from behind the table. Mom, what's happening? Grace forced a calm tone. Nothing you need to worry about. But her heart was pounding so hard she could barely hear her own words. She rushed to the bedroom. Lily's borrowed sweater was gone, and so was the pendant. God? No, Grace whispered. Outside, cameras still lingered on the street corner. She slipped on her coat and hurried down the fire escape, her mind racing. Lily wouldn't just vanish, not after everything. Across town, Alexander Drayton sat in his penthouse office, scrolling through his tablet, jaw tight as a news report replayed his confrontation from the night before. The footage showed him standing beside Grace in the apartment, his tone clipped and cold. The comments underneath were brutal. Arrogant billionaire humiliates waitress. Grace Miller fired twice for compassion. Drayton's empire built on cruelty? Ryan, his assistant, entered quietly. Sir, PR says the public's siding with her. They're calling her the people's hero. Alexander slammed the tablet shut. I didn't come here for popularity contests. I came here to find my daughter. Then maybe stop acting like a villain, Ryan muttered under his breath. Alexander's glare froze him mid-step, but something in his eyes softened a moment later. Find her, he said quietly. Discreetly. No police. Meanwhile, Grace took refuge in a nearby church, the kind with flickering candles and worn pews. She sat in the back, trying to collect her thoughts. She whispered into the silence. If she's out there, keep her safe, please. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I'm sorry, Grace. Don't come looking for me. L. Grace's throat closed up. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Not again. She stepped outside into the cold wind, determination burning through the fear. Because if no one else would protect Lily, Grace Miller would. Even if it meant going up against a billionaire. The sky over Manhattan had that washed-out grey color that promised another storm. Grace walked fast, her coat pulled tight, a stack of rejection letters stuffed in her bag. She had spent the last 12 hours searching every park bench, every alley, every bus terminal she could think of. No sign of Lily. She stopped at a coffee cart on the corner, her hands shaking as she paid for the cheapest thing on the menu. The vendor squinted at her. "You're that lady from TV, right? The waitress?" Grace froze. "Yeah, that's me." He nodded sympathetically. "People been talking about you all week. Some say you're a hero. Some say you're crazy." She managed a weak smile. "Guess it depends on who's paying for the airtime." He chuckled, sliding her the cup. "Hope you win, lady. Whatever this fight is." Grace walked away, the warmth of the cup doing little to thaw the cold building in her chest. She had one option left: go straight to the man who'd started all this. Across town, the Drayton Tower lobby gleamed with gold accents and polished marble floors. Everyone there looked expensive, like even their shoes had credit limits. Grace stood at the reception desk, out of place in her worn coat and scuffed boots. "I need to see Mr. Drayton," she said. The receptionist gave her a polite, frozen smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him it's Grace Miller," she said firmly. "He'll know who I am." The woman's expression shifted slightly at the name. She picked up the phone, whispered something, then nodded. "Take the private elevator to the top floor. He's expecting you." Grace's stomach churned as the elevator rose. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that looked more like a museum than an office floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek black marble, and a skyline that stretched forever. Alexander Drayton stood near the window, his reflection caught against the city's glare. He turned when she entered, his eyes unreadable. "You're persistent," he said. "I'm desperate," she replied. "Your lawyers are threatening to charge me with kidnapping." "They were doing their job," he said evenly. "You took my daughter into your home without notifying the authorities." Grace stepped closer, her voice shaking but strong. "She came to me because she was scared. You don't get to twist that into a crime." Alexander's jaw flexed. "She's a child. She doesn't understand the dangers she puts herself in." "She's not a child," Grace snapped. "She's a broken kid who needed someone to listen. And maybe if you'd been there instead of hiding behind your money, she wouldn't have run away in the first place." The words hit him like a slap. He turned away, staring out the window. "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked for the first time. "You think I sleep at night knowing I failed her?" Grace blinked, thrown off balance. "Then prove it. Stop making threats and start making things right." He turned back to her, eyes hard again. "And what would you have me do? Apologize on national television?" "Yes," she said simply. "You humiliated me in public. You can start by undoing that." Alexander stared at her for a long moment, the muscles in his jaw working. Then he nodded slightly. "Fine. You'll have your apology." "And good," she said, turning toward the elevator. "Make sure you mean it." Before she could leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss Miller, there's something you should know. Lily wasn't running from me." She turned slowly. "What are you talking about?" "She was running from someone else," he said quietly. "Someone who wanted that pendant." Grace's pulse spiked. "Who?" Alexander's eyes darkened. "The same people who killed her mother." Grace froze, the city spinning around her as the truth began to unfold, and she realized the fight had only just begun. For a long moment, Grace just stood there, staring at Alexander, unable to process what she'd just heard. "You're saying someone killed her mother? I thought your wife died from pneumonia." Alexander's expression hardened. "That's what I told the press, what everyone believed. But it wasn't an illness. It was a cover-up." Grace stepped closer. "Then, what really happened?" He exhaled slowly, walking toward the window. 5 years ago, Claire was leading a charity project, medical housing for low-income families. She discovered financial corruption inside one of my partner companies. They were laundering money through the charity. When she confronted them, they threatened her. I told her I'd handle it quietly. Legally. He paused, his voice dropping. 3 days later, she was found dead in her car. Police called it an accident. I knew better. Grace's chest tightened. And Lily? She overheard my phone call with the investigator. She thought I was part of it. His voice broke slightly. She was just a kid, grieving her mother, and she ran before I could explain. Grace felt the ground tilt beneath her. So, the pendant. It's more than jewelry, Alexander said. Claire had it custom made. Inside the casing is a digital key evidence. Every financial document she gathered before she died. It's encrypted. Only I and Lily know the code. Grace's pulse quickened. And whoever's after that evidence, they found her first. Alexander nodded grimly. They must have been following her. That's why I had to find her before they did. The weight of it settled like a storm between them. Grace's anger softened into disbelief. You should have told the truth from the start. He looked at her, weary but proud. Would you have believed me? Grace didn't answer. Instead, she rubbed her arms, trying to steady herself. So now what? She's gone again. The pendant's missing. Whoever killed your wife could be watching right now. Alexander's eyes darkened with purpose. Then we find her before they do. I'll assign protection for you and your son. She shook her head. No, I don't want your money or your men. I want to help. You've helped enough, he said, his tone soft but firm. This isn't your fight. Grace met his gaze. It is now. She trusted me when no one else did. Something flickered in his eyes, respect, maybe. He sighed. Fine. But you do exactly as I say. A knock broke the silence. Ryan, the assistant, stepped in with a tablet in hand, his expression tense. Sir, we just got a hit. Security camera at Union Station. Footage from an hour ago, someone matching Lily's description. Alexander turned to Grace. You coming? Grace grabbed her coat. Try to stop me. They drove through the city, intense silence, sirens echoing faintly in the distance. Grace stared out the window, watching the rain streak down again. Her thoughts raced. A murdered woman, a missing girl, a billionaire chasing ghosts, and her, a waitress, caught in the middle. When they reached the station, Alexander's security team was already combing through the crowd. Grace spotted a flash of familiar brown hair near the vending machines. Lily! She shouted. The girl turned eyes wide, terrified. Then she bolted. Grace sprinted after her, weaving through commuters. Lily, wait. The girl stopped only when she reached the far exit. You shouldn't be here, she cried. They're watching. Who? Grace gasped, catching her breath. Before Lily could answer, a black SUV screeched to a halt beside them. 2 men in dark coats stepped out, faces hidden under caps. Alexander shouted from across the lot. Lily, get down! But before anyone could move, one of the men reached into his coat, and Grace lunged without thinking, throwing herself between Lily and the gun that was already rising. The gunshot cracked through the air like lightning, splitting the world in half. People screamed. The sound echoed off the marble walls of the station as chaos erupted, suitcases flying, coffee spilling, feet pounding in every direction. Grace hit the floor hard, her ears ringing. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her mind scrambled to catch up, to understand what had just happened. Then she heard Lily's voice shaking, terrified. Grace. Grace. Get up. Grace blinked, her vision swimming. The bullet had hit the column just inches from her head. A small cloud of dust drifted down over her hair. She coughed and rolled onto her side, gripping Lily's arm. Run. Now. Alexander's voice bellowed from across the terminal. Security. Lock it down. His men surged forward, weapons drawn, but the 2 attackers were already moving. One grabbed the pendant from Lily's neck with a violent yank, snapping the chain. She gasped in pain as he shoved her aside. Got it, the man shouted. Grace didn't think she just reacted. She lunged again, catching the man by his coat and slamming her elbow into his ribs. He grunted, dropping the pendant. It skittered across the floor. Lily dove after it, but the second man grabbed her from behind. Let her go, Grace shouted. The man smirked, pressing a gun to Lily's side. "Walk away, lady. You don't want to die for someone else's kid." Grace's heart pounded. "You have no idea what I want." Before he could respond, Alexander appeared behind them, moving faster than anyone expected. He swung a heavy briefcase into the gunman's arm. The weapon clattered to the floor. Ryan tackled the first attacker, pinning him down. The second man cursed, shoving Lily toward the exit before sprinting into the crowd. Grace scrambled forward, grabbing Lily's hand. "Come on!" They ran together, dodging fallen luggage and terrified commuters. Behind them, sirens wailed as station security stormed in. Outside, the rain had started again, thin, icy sheets that blurred the flashing lights. Alexander caught up to them, his suit streaked with dirt and blood. "Are you both okay?" he asked, his breath ragged. Lily clutched the pendant in her fist, tears streaking down her cheeks. "They tried to kill us!" Grace turned on him, fury shaking her voice. "You said you could protect her." I didn't expect them to move this fast," he snapped back. "They must have been watching me, waiting for her to resurface." Grace stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "Then stop treating this like a business deal and start treating it like your family's life is on the line." For a long moment, Alexander didn't answer. The rain poured harder, flattening his silver-streaked hair. Then, quietly, he said, "You're right. Police cars arrived, lights strobing red and blue across the wet pavement. Officers pushed through the crowd, taking statements. One approached Alexander. "Sir, we need you to come with us for questioning." Alexander nodded, his eyes on Lily. "You go with Grace," he told her. "She'll keep you safe." Lily shook her head, panicked. "No, you can't just leave." He knelt, gripping her shoulders. "I promise, I'll fix this. I'll end this. But right now, you listen to her." Grace squeezed the girl's hand. "We'll be okay. I've got you." As they were led to a waiting patrol car, Lily whispered, "He doesn't get it. These people, they don't stop." Grace glanced at her. "Then neither will we." The car door slammed shut, muffling the chaos outside. Lily stared out the window as the city lights blurred by, clutching the pendant like it was her heartbeat. Grace turned to her and whispered, "You're safe for now, kid. But I think we both know this isn't over." And somewhere behind them, in the shadows of the station, a third figure picked up the gun the attackers had dropped and smiled. The rain hadn't stopped by the time Grace and Lily reached the safe house. It wasn't much, just a small two-bedroom apartment above a bakery, arranged through one of Alexander's security contacts. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the walls, a strange comfort after everything that had happened. Lily sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, the pendant clutched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were red, her voice barely a whisper. "They were going to kill me, Grace, if you hadn't been there." Grace cut her off gently. "You don't have to thank me, kid. I just did what anyone would have done." Lily shook her head. "No, nobody does what you did." Grace forced a smile, but her hands were trembling. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and fear. She went to the window, peeking through the blinds. "Alexander's still at the station. They'll keep him for hours." "Do you trust him?" Lily asked quietly. Grace turned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "He says he wants to protect me, but every time he shows up, someone gets hurt. My mom used to say power makes people dangerous, even when they think they're doing good." Grace sat beside her. "I think your dad's made a lot of mistakes, but I also think he'd burn down the world to make sure you're safe." Lily stared at the floor. "That's what scares me." Before Grace could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A low male voice spoke. "Miss Miller, I'd advise you to stop running." Grace froze. "Who is this?" "You don't need to know my name, but you have something that belongs to us. Give us the pendant, and this all goes away." Her heart pounded. "You're wasting your time. I don't negotiate with cowards." The voice chuckled, cold and slow. "Courage is useless when you're dead. We know where you are. Think about your son, Grace." The line went dead. Grace's stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. She grabbed her bag, her keys, Lily stood up. What happened? They know about Michael. Lily's face went pale. We have to call the police. Grace shook her head. No cops. If these people have half the power your dad says they do, the cops can't protect him. She was halfway to the door when Lily caught her wrist. You can't go alone. Grace looked her dead in the eye. I don't have a choice. Down on the street, the rain had turned to mist, coating everything in a thin silver sheen. Grace ran to the nearest cab, shouting Michael's address to the driver. Her mind was a blur. Every red light felt like a lifetime. When she reached the apartment building, her worst fear came true. The front door was wide open. Michael! She screamed, rushing inside. The living room was a mess, drawers pulled out, papers scattered. His toy robot lay broken on the floor. Then she heard it. A muffled sob. Grace turned toward the bedroom. Michael was huddled in the corner, shaking, a blanket wrapped around him. She dropped to her knees and pulled him close. Baby, it's okay. I'm here. You're safe. He was crying too hard to answer. A voice came from behind her. You won't be for long. Grace spun around. A man stood in the doorway, dressed in black, his face half hidden under a hood. He smiled faintly, a gun gleaming in his hand. You should have listened to the call, Miss Miller, he said calmly. Now this gets messy. Grace pushed Michael behind her, her voice trembling but fierce. You touch him, and I swear. The man cocked the gun. Brave, but useless. Before he could pull the trigger, a deafening crash shattered the window behind him. Alexander Drayton stepped through the glass, gun in hand. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the apartment as Alexander hit the floor, rolled, and came up aiming his gun square at the intruder. The man in black spun around, startled, his weapon jerking toward Alexander. Drop it, Alexander ordered, voice low and steady. The man smirked. You think money buys aim? Money doesn't, Alexander said, eyes narrowing. Training does. 2 gunshots exploded, almost simultaneously. The man's bullet tore through the lamp beside Grace, sending sparks across the wall. Alexander's shot hit the man in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The gun clattered to the floor. Grace grabbed Michael and pulled him behind the couch. The man groaned, clutching his arm as Alexander stalked forward, pressing the barrel of his gun against the man's chest. Who sent you? He demanded. The intruder coughed, a smear of blood on his lips. You already know who. The people your wife crossed. Alexander's jaw tightened. Names. Wouldn't matter. They're bigger than you. Bigger than me. You can't kill a shadow, Drayton. Alexander didn't hesitate. He struck the man across the face with the butt of his gun. The thug crumpled, unconscious. Grace stood slowly, still clutching her son. What the hell was that? An old enemy, Alexander said grimly. They've been quiet for years, I thought. He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. I thought they were gone. Michael clung to Grace's leg. Mom, who is he? She knelt, brushing his hair back. He's someone trying to help. Alexander holstered his weapon and turned to her. We need to get you both somewhere safe. They won't stop now. Grace shook her head, still trembling. I'm done running. You said they killed your wife. Then let's end this before they do it again. He studied her for a moment, something like admiration flickering behind his exhaustion. You're not afraid, are you? She swallowed hard, terrified. But fear doesn't feed my kid. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Then maybe we make a deal. Grace frowned. What kind of deal? You help me get the evidence from that pendant, he said. Claire encrypted it with a passphrase only Lily could know. If we unlock it, we can expose everything names, transactions, everything they've built. Grace's heart pounded. And if we fail? He looked her dead in the eye. Then they kill us all. Michael tugged at her sleeve. Mom, I don't want to die. Grace hugged him tightly. You won't, I promise. Then she looked at Alexander. All right. What do you need me to do? He handed her a phone. You're going to call Lily. Tell her to come back. She won't trust me, but she'll trust you. Grace hesitated. If she's still alive. She is, Alexander said firmly. They need her alive until they get the code. Grace exhaled, nodding. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number Lily had used to text her. The line rang once, twice, then a shaky voice answered. "Grace?" "Lily, thank God." Grace's relief came out in a rush. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe," Lily whispered. "I can't say where. They're following me." "Listen to me carefully," Grace said. "You're not safe. They found us. You have to come to me and your father tonight." "I can't. They said if I do, they'll kill you." Grace's breath caught. "Who said that?" But before Lily could answer, the line went dead. Alexander cursed, pacing the room. "They've got her phone. They're controlling every move she makes." Grace looked down at her trembling hands, then at her son. "Then we find her first." Alexander nodded slowly. "We will, but from this moment on, we do it my way." Grace met his eyes. "No, we do it our way." "Oh." And as sirens wailed in the distance, the two of them shook hands not as enemies, but as reluctant allies in a war neither could afford to lose. By sunrise, the city was already buzzing with whispers. News outlets replayed the security footage from the train station again and again, the billionaire's shootout, the waitress shielding his daughter, the chaos that followed. For the first time, the story wasn't about scandal. It was about survival. Grace stood in front of the bathroom mirror in the safe house, her reflection pale and tired. Her clothes still smelled faintly of gunpowder. She had been awake all night, alternating between watching Michael sleep and checking for any sign of movement outside. Every creak in the hallway made her heart jump. Behind her, Alexander stood by the doorway, jacket in hand, his voice low. "I have to face them." "Face who?" Grace asked, brushing her hair back. "The world," he said simply. "The board's demanding an explanation. The press is tearing me apart. I need to tell the truth." Grace turned to him. "You really think they'll believe you? A billionaire suddenly confessing he's been hiding a murder conspiracy?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "They don't need to believe me. They just need to hear it from me." She studied him. The man who'd once humiliated her now looked smaller, somehow haunted, human. "Then, say something real," she said softly. "Not the version your PR team writes. Say what you'd say if your daughter was watching." Alexander nodded slowly. "Would you come with me?" Grace blinked. "Why me?" "Because you're the reason anyone's still listening." A few hours later, the press conference began inside a glass-walled auditorium in Midtown. The air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters packed the aisles, cameras flashing like lightning. Alexander walked up to the podium, flanked by his lawyers and by Grace, who stood quietly off to the side, her heart pounding. He cleared his throat. "I've spent my life building things," he began. "Buildings, companies, a reputation. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the only thing worth building is trust." The crowd murmured. "My daughter, Lily, disappeared because she was afraid of me, afraid of what I had become. I told myself I was protecting her, but the truth is, I was protecting my pride." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "A woman named Grace Miller reminded me what decency looks like. She risked her job, her safety, even her life for a stranger. That's something I can never repay." Grace felt her throat tighten. Cameras swung toward her, flashes blinding. Alexander continued, "My wife's death was not an accident. She was murdered by people who profited from corruption in my company, and I let them hide behind my silence. That ends today." The room erupted, shouts, questions, chaos. Grace watched as Alexander stood tall, the weight of years of guilt pressing against his shoulders. Reporters pushed forward. "Mr. Drayton, are you admitting criminal negligence?" "Yes," he said simply, "and I'll take whatever punishment comes with it. But first, I'm going to finish what my wife started." He looked toward Grace. "And I won't be doing it alone." After the conference, they stepped outside into a storm of microphones. Grace flinched as voices shouted her name, asking how a waitress became part of a billionaire's scandal. Alexander gently put a hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them." Easy for you to say," she muttered. He almost smiled. "You'll get used to it." They climbed into the car as the crowd roared behind them. For the first time, Grace felt something unexpected hope. As the car pulled away, Alexander glanced out the window, his reflection layered over the flashing lights. "You were right," he said quietly. "It's not about power. It's about people." Grace looked at him, her voice soft but sure. "Then let's go find yours before they find her." Neither of them saw the black SUV merge into traffic behind them, its tinted windows hiding the man who had survived the gunfight at the station, now holding a new photo. Grace, circled in red ink. The storm that night was relentless. Wind howled down the empty avenues like something alive, and rain lashed against the windows of Drayton Tower, as if trying to break its way inside. Grace sat in the corner of Alexander's office, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Alexander paced in front of his desk, barking orders into his phone. "I want a full audit on every offshore account connected to Larkson Industries. Freeze anything tied to the Haven Foundation." Ryan, his assistant, stood nearby with a tablet. "Sir, that'll trigger alarms. They'll know you're moving against them." "I want them to know," Alexander said, voice cold and steady. "Let them feel what it's like to be hunted." Grace looked up. "What if they don't scare easy?" He turned toward her. "Then they'll make a mistake. That's when we strike." "Oh." But even as he said it, there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, a kind of exhaustion that ran deeper than fear. Grace had seen it before, in people who'd lost too much to keep pretending they were invincible. Before she could speak, Ryan's tablet buzzed. He frowned at the screen. "Sir, we've got a problem. Someone inside the boardroom just leaked our location to the press." Alexander's expression darkened. "Who?" Ryan hesitated. "I don't know, but it came from an encrypted company channel." Grace stood. "You said these people were powerful. Maybe one of them is closer than you think." Alexander was about to respond when his office door opened, and Brenda Vance, the manager from the Golden Cup Diner, stepped in, soaking wet and shaking off an umbrella. Grace's jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding me." Brenda offered a nervous smile. "Small world, huh?" Alexander frowned. "You two know each other?" Grace crossed her arms. "She fired me. Twice." Brenda sighed. "Yeah, and I'm not proud of it. But when the story went viral, I got a call from someone offering me a job. A very high-paying job. Said it was about you, Drayton." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "I don't know," Brenda said quickly. "They never gave a name. Just told me to show up tonight and deliver a message." Grace tensed. "What message?" Brenda reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Her hands trembling, she placed it on Alexander's desk. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph, Grace and Michael leaving their apartment earlier that week, and a short, handwritten note. "You can't protect everyone." Grace's stomach twisted. "They're watching us." Alexander's face hardened. "They're taunting us." Before he could say more, the lights flickered. The monitors on his desk went black, replaced by a single line of text. "System breach detected." Ryan swore under his breath, typing frantically. "They've hacked the building's network. I can't shut them out." The PA system crackled to life, and a distorted voice filled the room. "You're predictable, Alexander. You think confession buys forgiveness, but all it buys is time, and you just ran out." Grace's blood ran cold. "Is that?" "Them," Alexander said grimly. "Get her out now." Security alarms wailed. The elevators shut down. Red emergency lights flashed across the marble floor. Grace grabbed Brenda's arm. "Stairs this way." They sprinted down the corridor as explosions echoed from somewhere below. Alexander stayed behind, barking into his earpiece. "Seal the lower levels. Get my daughter to the backup safe house." Grace stopped at the stairwell door, looking back. "Alexander, come on." He looked at her. Rain and smoke reflected in his eyes. "Go. I'll draw them off." "Don't you dare. Go." The door slammed shut between them, and the last thing Grace saw before descending into darkness was the glow of fire swallowing his office whole. Smoke rolled down the stairwell like a living thing. Grace covered her mouth with her sleeve and pushed Brenda ahead of her. Every step echoed with panic and heat. The alarm's shrill cry filled her ears, but underneath it she could hear something worse. Gunfire. By the time they reached the lobby, the building was chaos. Security guards shouted orders. Glass rained down from the shattered ceiling. Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the stormy night in strobe. "Come on," Grace shouted, grabbing Brenda's hand as they pushed through the crowd. "We have to find Lily." Brenda gasped for air, clutching her side. "She's at the gala. The Drayton Foundation gala. They moved it up to tonight." Grace stopped dead. "What?" "She called me," Brenda coughed. "Before I came here. Said she was going to expose everything on stage. She's planning to show the files from the pendant." Grace's stomach twisted. "She'll be walking straight into a trap." Ugh. They burst through the revolving doors into the freezing night. The street was chaos, sirens, smoke, and reporters. Grace spotted Ryan by a black SUV, shouting into a radio. "Where's Alexander?" she yelled. Ryan's face was ashen. "He's still inside. Fire crews can't reach him." Grace's throat tightened. "Then, we have to get to Lily before they do." He threw her the keys. "Take the car. Go." She didn't hesitate. The tires screamed as the SUV shot into traffic, slicing through the storm toward the glittering skyline. The gala was being held at the Meridian Hotel, a marble palace overlooking the river. The red carpet was still slick from the rain, lined with photographers who had no idea a war was unfolding behind the scenes. Inside, chandeliers blazed, champagne sparkled, and the city's elite smiled for cameras, oblivious. Grace parked in a side alley, grabbed the pendant Lily had left behind at the safe house, and ran through the service entrance. The staff corridors smelled of perfume and money. She followed the sound of applause to the ballroom. Through the half-open doors, she saw Lily on stage, her face pale under the lights. In her trembling hand, she held a flash drive. "Everything you see here," Lily said into the microphone, "proves that my mother's death wasn't an accident. These men, my father's business partners, killed her to hide the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of the executives, a tall man in a white tuxedo, stood up. "That's enough, young lady." Lily's voice shook. "No, it's not." She plugged the drive into a laptop. The giant screen behind her flickered to life. Financial records, wire transfers, shell companies. The audience murmured in disbelief. But then the screen went black. The sound system screeched. A voice, low and mocking, filled the room. "Did you really think we'd let you finish?" Grace pushed through the crowd just as the lights went out completely. Screams erupted. In the chaos, she saw a shadow moving toward the stage, a man in black. "Lily." The girl turned, her eyes widening as Grace leapt onto the platform. The man swung something metallic, a pistol catching the light. Grace tackled him before he could fire. They hit the floor hard, the gun skittering away. He slammed an elbow into her ribs, knocking the wind out of her. "You don't know who you're fighting," he hissed. She spat blood and glared up at him. "Yeah? Neither do you." From across the ballroom came a roar. Smoke parted, and Alexander Drayton stumbled through the wreckage of the side door, covered in soot, eyes blazing. "Get your hands off my daughter," he growled. The man froze. Alexander raised a gun, steady as stone. One shot rang out. The attacker dropped instantly. The crowd screamed. Lily sobbed, collapsing into her father's arms. Grace staggered to her feet, shaking, as sirens wailed outside the building. Alexander looked at her through the haze of smoke and chaos. "You saved her again." Grace managed a weak smile. "Guess I make a habit of it." But above them, unseen in the balcony shadows, another figure watched, smiling faintly as he whispered into a hidden earpiece. "Phase 2 is ready." The ballroom was chaos, smoke curling from the ceiling, sirens blaring outside, guests rushing for the exits in a storm of designer gowns and panic. Grace stood among the wreckage, blood on her lip, heart pounding so hard she could barely hear anything over the noise. Alexander still held Lily in his arms, trembling. For the first time, the titan of industry looked utterly human, broken, relieved, undone. "It's over," Lily whispered, tears streaking her face. Alexander shook his head slowly. "No, sweetheart." "Not yet." Grace stepped closer, clutching her side where the hitman's elbow had left a deep bruise. She's right. You exposed them. Everyone saw. It's done. He looked up at her, eyes clouded with both guilt and determination. You don't understand. The man who ordered Claire's death wasn't here tonight. He's still out there, and now he knows we're coming for him. Before Grace could answer, a group of officers burst through the main doors, weapons drawn. Everyone on the ground, Lily cried out. No, they're with us. But the lead officer, a stern man with a scar across his cheek, ignored her. Alexander Drayton, you're under arrest for unlawful possession of firearms, obstruction of justice, and manslaughter. Grace froze. What? That's insane. He just saved his daughter. The officer didn't blink. Tell it to the judge. Alexander stood tall, raising his hands. It's fine, he said quietly. I knew this was coming. Lily clung to him. Dad, please don't. He kissed her forehead gently. This isn't the end, baby girl. It's the beginning. Grace's chest ached as she watched the police lead him away. The flashing lights from outside spilled across the ballroom floor, washing everything in harsh, cold color. Later, Grace found herself sitting on the steps outside the hotel, wrapped in a blanket from paramedics. Lily sat beside her, silent. The rain had started again, soft and steady this time, as if the sky itself was trying to wash the blood and smoke away. You know what's crazy? Grace said quietly. I used to think guys like him didn't feel anything, that they just built walls and hid behind money. But he really does love you. Lily's voice cracked. I didn't see it until tonight. Grace gave a faint smile. Better late than never. The girl looked at her. He wouldn't have made it this far without you. None of us would. Oh? Grace shook her head. I just did what needed doing. At that, Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the pendant. He said Mom hid a code inside. Maybe it can help prove what he said at the press conference. Grace frowned. You sure you want to open that? Lily nodded, her hands trembling. She pressed a small latch on the side of the pendant. A faint click echoed, followed by a soft glow. Hidden inside was a microchip, no bigger than a fingernail. That's it, Grace breathed. That's the key. Lily stared at it, awe mixing with fear. Then we finish this. For Mom. Before Grace could respond, Ryan appeared from the shadows, his suit wrinkled, his face pale. You two need to move, he said urgently. The board's already scrambling. Half of them are on the run, but one Larkson he's making his move tonight. Grace stood, slipping the pendant into her pocket. Then we don't wait. We take it to the police, straight to the DA. Ryan hesitated. Grace, the DA's office has been compromised. That's why Drayton went public. You can't trust anyone. Lily clenched her fists. Then who's left? Grace looked out at the city, lightning flashing across the skyline. Us. Just us. She glanced at the pendant, the glow fading as the rain fell harder. Your mum died fighting for truth. Let's make sure it wasn't for nothing. And as they disappeared into the night, neither of them noticed the black car idling across the street, its driver lifting a phone to his ear and saying, They have the key. The city never truly slept, but that night it felt restless, like the whole skyline was holding its breath. Grace drove through the rain-slick streets with Lily in the passenger seat, both silent, both running on fumes. The pendant sat in Grace's coat pocket, glowing faintly in the dark like a secret heartbeat. They pulled into the back lot of an old diner on the outskirts of town, the Gilded Sparrow, the very place where this entire story had started. Grace killed the engine and sat for a long moment, staring at the neon sign flickering in the rain. This place, Lily whispered. You used to work here. Grace nodded. Yeah, lost my job here too. She let out a humorless laugh. Feels like forever ago. Lily turned to her. Why come back? Because I know someone who still owes me a favor, Grace said, pushing the door open. Inside, the diner was nearly empty, just the hum of the lights, the smell of burnt coffee, and a tired cook reading a newspaper behind the counter. He looked up as they entered. Grace Miller, he said, surprise flickering in his eyes. Didn't think I'd see you again. Hi, Gerald, she said softly. I need your help. The cook wiped his hands on his apron. You're all over the news, you know. People say you saved that billionaire's daughter. Yeah. Well, Grace muttered, glancing toward Lily. Depends on who's telling it. Gerald frowned. You in trouble? Not yet, Grace replied. But if we don't move fast, a lot of people will be. They sat at a corner booth while Gerald locked the door and pulled the blinds. Grace placed the pendant on the table. You still got that computer set up in the office? The one you used to stream football games when business was slow? He blinked. Yeah, why? Because this thing holds evidence that could blow open the biggest corruption case in the country. Gerald raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Grace met his gaze. Dead serious. Minutes later, they huddled in the cramped office behind the kitchen, the air thick with the smell of fryer oil. Gerald connected the pendant's microchip to his old desktop. The screen flickered, loading a labyrinth of encrypted files. Holy hell, he whispered. These are bank transfers, millions. Offshore accounts, political donations, fake charities. Lily leaned forward. That's Mom's signature. She was tracking them. Grace's heart pounded. Can you decrypt it? Gerald nodded slowly. Yeah, but it'll take a while. Before he could start, the front door's bell jingled. Grace froze. No one should have been able to get in. Gerald whispered. I locked it. A shadow appeared in the doorway. Then, another. Black suits, earpieces, guns drawn. Grace shoved Lily behind the desk. Run. The men moved fast, sweeping through the diner. One barked into a radio. We've got them. The key's here. Grace grabbed the nearest thing, a cast-iron pan, and swung it hard. The man went down, but two more burst through the kitchen. Shots shattered glass and sent sparks flying. Through the back, Grace shouted. Lily ducked through the storage room, clutching the drive. Gerald tried to cover them, but a bullet tore through the shelf beside him, knocking him to the floor. Grace turned back. Gerald, go, he gasped, blood seeping through his apron. End this, Grace. Tears blurred her vision as she pulled Lily out the back door into the storm. They ran through the alley, sirens echoing somewhere far away. Rain drenched them, but Grace didn't stop until they reached the edge of the parking lot. Lily looked back, shaking. We can't keep running like this. Grace nodded, breath ragged. You're right. She straightened, eyes burning with resolve. We stop running tonight. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she'd sworn she'd never use again. Ryan, she said when he answered. Tell Drayton we've got the evidence. It's time to bring this whole thing down. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the city, and in that split second, a sniper scope glinted from a rooftop across the street. The shot split the night. Glass shattered, rain hissed, and Grace threw herself over Lily as the bullet punched through the back wall of the alley. The echo rang in her skull like a bell. Stay down, she shouted, pressing Lily flat against the ground. Somewhere above, a muzzle flash flared again, but before the next shot came, tires screeched from the street. A black SUV skidded into view, and the passenger door flew open. Ryan leaned out, waving frantically. Get in now. Grace didn't think. She grabbed Lily's wrist and sprinted. Another bullet sparked off the pavement behind them as they dove into the vehicle. Ryan slammed the door and hit the gas, fishtailing onto the wet road. Lily clutched the pendant to her chest, breathing hard. They found us again. Grace turned to Ryan. How? I didn't tell anyone where we were. Ryan's jaw clenched. You didn't have to. The moment you powered that computer, they traced the IP address. These people own half the tech infrastructure in the city. Grace swore under her breath. And Alexander? Is he? He's alive, Ryan interrupted. But they've buried him in legal hell. The board voted him out this morning. Every asset frozen. They're making him the scapegoat for everything. Lily shook her head, tears streaking down her face. He did the right thing. He told the truth. Ryan sighed. And that's exactly why they're destroying him. The SUV sped through the rain-slick streets until Ryan pulled into an underground parking garage. We can't stay out in the open, he said. But there's one card left to play. Grace frowned. What card? He turned toward her, eyes intense. Public opinion. The world already saw the press conference. They think you're the only one they can trust. Grace blinked. Me? Yeah. The waitress who defied billionaires and saved a lost girl. You're the face they can't buy, can't threaten. You release the files yourself. It blows everything open before they can spin it. Lily grabbed her hand. He's right. You're the only one left who can do this. Grace stared at them both, heart racing. You're asking me to go on camera with evidence that people have already killed for. Ryan's voice softened. You've been risking your life for this since day one. Don't stop now. She swallowed hard, then nodded. All right, let's do it. They found an old news studio that had gone out of business months ago, its sign still hanging crooked over the door. Ryan hacked the signal lines, patching into every major broadcast feed he could reach. Grace sat under the harsh white lights, a microphone in front of her, Lily beside her clutching the pendant. When the red light blinked on, she took a deep breath. My name is Grace Miller, she began, voice trembling at first but growing stronger with every word. I'm not a politician or a CEO or anyone special. I'm just someone who saw a girl who needed help and ended up seeing how far people will go to silence the truth. She laid the pendant on the table, its glow catching the camera lens. Inside this is proof, names, accounts, money trails, everything that cost Claire Drayton her life. Her husband tried to expose it and lost everything. Now it's my turn. Lily's eyes filled with tears. Grace reached over and took her hand. Her mother believed that one voice can make a difference. I guess now we'll find out if she was right. She pressed a key on the laptop. The encrypted files began uploading across every live network, every news site, every social channel in the country. The screen behind them filled with documents and names, politicians, corporations, foundations, all connected in one sprawling web of corruption. Ryan exhaled. It's done. Grace looked straight into the camera. You can burn down buildings, silence people, even kill for power, but truth doesn't stay buried forever. Outside, as the feed went viral worldwide, the man who had ordered the hits watched from a penthouse window, and for the first time, he looked afraid. The world woke up to Grace Miller. By dawn, her face was on every news channel, every phone screen, every headline. Waitress exposes $1 billion conspiracy. Single mother brings down corrupt empire. The truth they tried to bury. Grace sat in the corner of the abandoned studio, staring blankly at the laptop as comments and reactions flooded in by the thousands. It didn't feel real. The danger, the fear, the blood, it all seemed far away now, replaced by a numb quiet she didn't quite trust. Lily sat beside her, scrolling through her phone. They're calling you a hero, she said softly. Grace let out a tired laugh. Heroes don't usually have rent due. Lily smiled faintly. You did what no one else could. My mom would have loved you. That made Grace's chest tighten. She turned to the girl, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. Your mom's the reason we're still breathing. Don't forget that. Just then, Ryan stepped into the room, holding a small radio. His usual calm expression was gone, replaced by something between relief and disbelief. It's over, he said. Federal investigators raided every company linked to the files this morning. Dozens of arrests. Offshore accounts frozen. The main suspect, Larkson, was caught trying to leave the country. Lily's eyes widened. And my dad? Ryan smiled for the first time in days. He's free. They dropped the charges. Grace felt her breath catch. He's out? Just walked out of custody an hour ago, Ryan said. He's asking for you both. Grace looked at Lily, who was already crying. He did it, Grace, the girl whispered. He kept his promise. They drove across town through streets buzzing with reporters and cheering crowds. People held up signs, truth wins and thank you. Grace, their faces glowing with something rare in that city. Hope. The car pulled up outside a courthouse, now surrounded by cameras and flashing lights. Alexander Drayton stood on the steps, a free man again, his suit wrinkled, his eyes red but alive. When he saw Lily running toward him, his entire body seemed to break open. He dropped to his knees and caught her in his arms, holding her like he would never let go again. I'm so sorry, he whispered against her hair. For everything. Lily sobbed into his chest. Just don't disappear again. Grace stood a few feet away, watching the reunion through tears she didn't bother to hide. Alexander looked up and met her eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he crossed the distance and took her hand, his grip trembling. "You saved her," he said softly. "You saved both of us." Grace shook her head. "No. You saved yourself when you told the truth." "Oh." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Maybe, but I wouldn't have had the courage without you." Reporters shouted questions. Flashes burst around them, but Grace barely heard any of it. For the first time in months, her heart wasn't pounding with fear. It was steady, quiet, whole. Later, as the sun broke through the clouds, Alexander approached her again. "The board's gone. I'm rebuilding the company into something different, transparent, honest, and I want you to help me run it." Grace blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm a waitress." He smiled. "You were. Now you're the reason this place still has a soul." Lily grinned. "Told you, you're a hero." Grace laughed, shaking her head. "I don't want power or titles. I just want peace. For me and my son." Alexander nodded. "Then let me give you that. A new start. No strings." She hesitated, then smiled. "All right, but only if the coffee's free." He chuckled, the sound lighter than it had ever been. As the three of them stood beneath the clear morning sky, the city still buzzing with the shock of truth, Grace realized she hadn't just survived the storm, she'd helped end it. And for once, that was enough. 2 months later, spring returned to the city. The rain had stopped, and the air carried that new kind of warmth that only comes after a storm has done its worst. Life was beginning to settle again, or at least pretending to. Grace leaned on the counter of her new diner, Grace's table, the morning rush humming around her. The place smelled like fresh coffee and pancakes instead of desperation. Her employees laughed as they worked. Even the radio played something bright for once. Michael was sitting at a booth doing homework, his asthma finally under control, his face healthier, happier. Every so often he'd glance up, grin, and wave to his mum behind the counter. Grace would wave back, her chest swelling with the kind of quiet pride she hadn't felt in years. The bell over the door jingled, and in walked Alexander Drayton, no suit today, just jeans and a grey sweater. The billionaire who once ruled a skyline now looked like a man who'd learned to breathe again. Grace smirked. "You're late for your shift, boss." He chuckled, sliding into a seat. "You keep calling me that, and people are going to think I actually work here. Considering you financed half the renovation, you do." She shot back. "Coffee? Please. Black. No sugar. I'm trying to live like the working class." She rolled her eyes, pouring his cup. "You'll never survive." He laughed quietly, then glanced around. The place was busy, really busy. "You did this," he said softly. "You turned a scandal into something good." Grace shrugged, pretending to be casual. "People just needed a place to feel normal again." He studied her for a moment. "I never thanked you properly. You've said thank you more times than I can count. Not for saving me," he said. "For saving my daughter." Grace looked down, her voice gentler now. "She saved herself. I just gave her a little push." They both turned as the door opened again. Lily walked in, her hair tied back, a tote bag slung over her shoulder. She looked older somehow, more grounded, like the weight of the world had finally eased a little. "Hey, you two," she greeted, smiling. "Dad, stop hovering." "Grace, I brought something for you." Grace frowned. "What is it?" Lily reached into her bag and pulled out a small white envelope. "Just open it." Inside was a folded piece of paper and a deed. Grace's name was written across the top in bold print. "What is this?" Alexander smiled faintly. "The apartment. It's yours. No rent. No catch." Grace's eyes widened. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he said. "You've spent your whole life paying for other people's mistakes. You deserve something that's finally yours." She stared at the paper for a long moment, then reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Alex. For everything." Lily grinned. Don't thank him too much. He's still late on paperwork. They all laughed, the sound light and easy. For the first time, none of it felt fragile. But as Grace tucked the deed into her apron pocket, a quiet thought stirred in the back of her mind. Something about closure never came easy to her. That night, after closing, she locked the doors and sat alone in the quiet diner. The neon sign outside buzzed softly. She opened the envelope again and noticed something else tucked behind the deed. A note, in Lily's handwriting. For the woman who gave me back my father. Grace smiled, her eyes blurring with tears. But as she folded the note, something else fell out, a small silver flash drive. She frowned, turning it in her fingers. On one side, engraved in faint letters, was a name she didn't recognize. Claire's, Key 2. Her heart skipped. What in the world? She looked toward the window, where the city lights flickered like stars. And for the first time since it all began, Grace realized the story wasn't quite over. Someone, somewhere, had left one last secret for her to uncover. The next morning, the city woke up golden and calm, as if all the noise and fear of the past months had finally dissolved into sunlight. Grace walked to the diner early, the streets still quiet except for the sound of pigeons fluttering from rooftop to rooftop. Inside, everything was exactly how she liked it. The smell of brewed coffee, the clink of dishes, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the back. But the little silver flash drive from the night before still sat in her pocket, its weight reminding her that peace was never simple. She locked the door, took a deep breath, and slid the drive into the laptop behind the counter. For a moment, the screen stayed black. Then a folder appeared, one single file, labeled, For Grace. She clicked it. A video opened. The image was slightly grainy, but the face was unmistakable. Claire Drayton, Lily's mother. Grace gasped. "Hello," Claire said softly, her voice calm and kind, as if she was speaking across time. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and whoever you are, you've found what I couldn't finish." She smiled faintly. "I built something to fight the corruption that destroyed lives. I called it Project Haven, and if you've come this far, you're the kind of person who can finish it." Grace's hands trembled. Claire continued. "The second key, the one you hold, activates the foundation account. Use it for the people who need it most. No corporations, no politics, just kindness." The video flickered, and then it ended. Grace sat there for a long moment, tears silently tracing her cheeks. Then she closed the laptop and whispered, "You got it, Claire. I'll finish what you started." A few hours later, Grace's table opened its doors to a line that stretched down the block. Word had spread every Thursday. The diner now served free meals to anyone in need, no questions asked. The city called it Haven Thursdays. Michael worked the counter proudly, handing out plates like he'd been born for it. Lily helped in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, laughing as she burned toast for the third time. Alexander showed up around noon, holding a bouquet of daisies. "I brought peace offerings," he said, setting them on the counter. Grace smirked. "You? Flowers? Who are you trying to impress?" He smiled. "You, obviously. And maybe karma." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." They stood side by side, watching the crowd. Families, strangers, people who looked like they hadn't been noticed in years, all eating, laughing, living. "This," Alexander said quietly, "was my wife's dream." Grace looked at him. "Then it's our job to keep it alive." He nodded. "Together." Later that night, when the diner finally emptied, Grace sat at a booth with a cup of tea, exhaustion settling into her bones. Lily joined her, sliding into the seat across from her. "I think Mom would have liked you," Lily said softly. Grace smiled. "I think she already does." Outside, the city lights reflected in the diner's windows, glowing like embers. Lily hesitated, then reached into her pocket. "You're not going to believe this," she said, setting something on the table. It was the pendant, restored, polished, whole again. "I thought it was lost," Grace whispered. Lily shook her head. "Dad had it fixed. He said it belongs here." Grace turned the pendant in her fingers. the engraved wings catching the light. Then she stood, walked to the wall behind the counter, and hung it there framed above the register, a symbol of everything they'd fought for. Alexander joined them, sliding an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "Looks perfect," he said. Grace nodded, her voice steady but soft. "No, it is perfect." For the first time in a long time, the silence in the diner wasn't heavy, it was full of peace, of purpose, of home. And as the neon sign outside flickered to life Grace's table, everyone, "Welcome." The camera lingered on the pendant's reflection, shining like a promise that kindness, no matter how small, could change the world. So that's how the story ends, my friends. If you're still here right now, something in this journey must have touched your heart. Maybe it's Grace's courage, or Lily's forgiveness, or that quiet moment when truth finally won. Whatever it is, it's worth holding on to. Because life isn't about what breaks us. It's about how we rebuild. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Grace lived that truth, turning pain into purpose, fear into strength, and loss into compassion. When we choose kindness, even when the world gives us every reason not to, we heal something much deeper than wounds. We heal what makes us human. So as you close this story, take a breath. Think about the people you can forgive, the truths you can stand up for, and the light you can share in dark places. That's how ordinary souls change the world. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with us because the next story might just remind you how powerful your heart really is.